Welcome back to Bedtime Stories 247. Right now, let's dive into today's story together. And don't forget to hit subscribe to support our channel. Tonight, I invite you to listen to a story about a wedding night that promised only the chilling silence between a young woman and an 80-year-old man. But as darkness consumed the room, a whisper in my ear sent a paralyzing shiver through my entire body. The secret he had hidden his whole life was now entrusted to me. From that moment, I knew I had been dragged into a terrifying vortex with no escape. If you wish to uncover the truth behind this tale, I invite you to listen and experience it right now. My name is Lily, and I've just turned 23. An age that should be filled with innocence, an age for holding the hand of the one you love as you step into a marriage of your own choosing. Instead, I was thrust into a life dictated by cold calculation. That day, my mother sat in our small kitchen, her hands clutching a thick stack of cash, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of delight and anxiety. She looked at me, her voice sharp. "You have to listen to me, Lily. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. $500,000 is no small sum. You could work your whole life and never earn that much. Just marry him. I'll take care of the rest." I was speechless. I couldn't understand how my own mother could treat her daughter like a commodity to be bought and sold. The man she called my future husband was over 80. His hair was stark white, his skin a roadmap of wrinkles, his back stooped, and his face a canvas of time's deep folds. His name was Alistair Blackwood. He was once a powerful construction magnate, but his wife had passed away long ago, and his children all lived abroad. Rumor had it he lived a solitary life in his crumbling mansion, with only a few housekeepers coming and going. No one ever imagined that one day he would agree to marry a young woman like me. I sat motionless, tears falling, each one a heavy weight. I had never dreamed of wealth. I only wanted a normal life, the freedom to choose whom I loved. But now my mother had made the decision for me, leaving no room for refusal. Every word of protest was brushed aside. "Take a look around, Lily. Your father left us long ago. I raised you by myself. Now I'm struggling, buried in debt, and I need to secure my old age. Would you let me die in poverty?" Her words were a knife twisting in my heart, leaving me choked and silent. The wedding was organized with a speed that left me breathless. The pristine white wedding dress felt like a funeral shroud against my skin. The whispers and forced smiles of relatives, mixed with the snickers of neighbors, made me want to disappear. Everyone looked at me with pity. Some even shook their heads, muttering, "To trade your youth for money, what a shame." I walked down the aisle on trembling legs, my heart as heavy as if it were weighed down by 1,000 stones. Mr. Blackwood sat on a large wooden throne-like chair, dressed in a black silk suit. His eyes seemed tired, yet held a hidden secret. He didn't smile or speak much, just offered a listless nod. I glanced at his face, at the deep, ugly wrinkles and his cloudy, dull eyes, and a feeling of fear and dread washed over me. I wondered what I would have to face tonight in our bridal chamber. When the party ended and the guests had gone, the mansion fell into a deep silence. I was led to a large room where an intricately carved wooden bed awaited. Red candles flickered, and the scent of incense filled the air, but it all just made me more suffocated. I sat frozen on the edge of the bed, my palms slick with sweat. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall seemed to mock me, urging time forward. The door creaked open, and Mr. Blackwood entered. He moved slowly, his feet shuffling, and a dry, rattling cough echoed in the quiet room. My body went rigid, my heart pounding against my ribs. He sat down beside me, making no move to touch me, simply staring at me in silence for a long, long time. That silence was more terrifying than anything I could have imagined. A chill ran down my spine. I wanted to run, but my feet felt glued to the floor. Suddenly, Mr. Blackwood leaned close to my ear, his voice a frail but clear whisper. "My dear girl, I do not need your body. I only need you to stay here and listen to a secret I have kept for more than half my life. If I don't tell someone, I cannot die in peace." I froze, my whole body trembling. His words were like a hammer blow, shattering all my horrifying fantasies about the wedding night. I didn't know whether to be scared or relieved. He wouldn't touch me, but his mention of a secret made my skin crawl. He spoke with a grave seriousness, his eyes holding something truly terrible. I stammered, my voice shaking. What secret?" Mr. Blackwood gave a faint, sad smile, but said no more. He just looked out the window. The moonlight cast an eerie glow on his wrinkled face and cloudy eyes, making him look both pitiable and mysterious. "It is not yet time. You will know soon enough. But remember this. From now on, you are a part of this house. You must obey me. If you disobey, you will not only harm yourself, but also bring ruin upon your mother." Hearing him mention my mother, my heart ached. My fate was now bound not just by money, but by some secret that could involve life and death. I sat rooted to the spot, my hands clutching my dress, feeling utterly trapped. That wedding night, I didn't fall into my husband's arms, but into a dark labyrinth of fear and doubt. The night stretched on endlessly. Mr. Blackwood lay down, his back turned to me. His heavy, regular breathing filled the room, while I sat wide-eyed, too terrified to sleep, my heart in chaos. His words echoed in my mind. "Secret, obey, bring ruin upon your mother," like ghosts dancing around me. I didn't know what I was about to face, but my intuition screamed that the path ahead was shrouded in an inescapable darkness. And this was only the beginning of my tragic days in this house. The wedding night passed in terrifying silence. I stayed awake until the first light of dawn crept through the window blinds. Mr. Blackwood had been asleep for hours, his breathing heavy and labored, punctuated by occasional dry coughs that made me jump. I couldn't close my eyes. Every word he'd spoken last night replayed in my head, so vividly that if I shut my eyes, I could see his wrinkled face leaning into mine, his hoarse whisper echoing, "You must obey me, or your mother won't be safe either." I sat with my knees hugged to my chest, staring out at the pale morning light. The wedding was over, but I felt no joy or hope, only a gnawing fear and a vague, unsettling confusion. What was the secret he spoke of, and how did it involve my mother? When Mr. Blackwood woke, he said little. He coughed once, then leaned on his cane and walked out, leaving me alone in the silent room. Watching his frail figure disappear behind the door, I sighed, feeling a mix of fear and pity. A man so close to death, yet still carrying a secret so dreadful he had to ensnare a young wife to bear it. That morning, I went down to the kitchen and found the housekeeper, a woman named Mrs. Gable, setting the table. Mrs. Gable had been in the mansion for many years. Her hair was gray, her frame small, but her eyes were sharp. Seeing me, she offered a faint, dismissive smile. "Miss Lily, please sit. Have something to eat to regain your strength. You are young, and the road ahead of you is long and difficult." Her words startled me. They sounded like a veiled warning. I looked at her, about to ask more, but she simply bent down to continue her work, saying nothing further. A seed of suspicion grew in my mind. Clearly, someone else in this house knew about the secret. Mrs. Gable seemed all too familiar with the darkness that dwelled here. The look in her eyes even held a hint of pity for me. In the days that followed, my life fell into a strange routine. Mr. Blackwood never touched me. He would just spend his evenings in the living room, sitting in his large wooden armchair, smoking his pipe, his eyes gazing into the distance as if watching a world no one else could see. Occasionally, he would call me to sit beside him and ask bizarre, disconnected questions. "Have you ever had a dream where someone came to warn you? Are you afraid of ghosts? If one day you discovered something buried under the floor of this house, would you dare to speak of it? Each question sent a chill down my spine. I never knew how to answer, just stammering a nod or a shake of my head to get by. But I could feel a heavy, oppressive presence weighing down the entire house. One afternoon, as I walked past the hallway, I overheard Mr. Blackwood and Mrs. Gable talking in a room. His voice was a hoarse, raspy whisper. "You must remember, this must never get out. If the girl finds out too soon, I'm not sure she can handle it." Mrs. Gable replied softly, "But sir, you can't hide it forever. The time to face it will come." He snapped back in a low but firm tone, "Not yet." My heart hammered against my chest. I quickly stepped back behind the door, holding my breath. So the secret was real, and I was being drawn into it, completely unaware. That night, sleep eluded me. I tossed and turned, my mind racing with questions. I remembered the day my mother took the money from Mr. Blackwood, the greedy and calculating look in her eyes. She had married me off for $500,000 without a second thought for my life. But did my mother know anything about this secret? Or was she just an unwitting accomplice, blinded by money? I decided I had to find out. I couldn't live in this vague terror any longer. One night, when the house was asleep, I tiptoed out of my room. The long hallway was dim, the faint yellow light casting long, spooky shadows that chilled me to the bone. I crept downstairs to the basement, which I had seen Mrs. Gable lock securely during the day. The lock was old but solid. I jiggled it gently, and the clicking sound echoed in the night. Suddenly, a bony hand landed on my shoulder from behind. I gasped and spun around to see Mr. Blackwood standing there, his cloudy eyes fixed on me. His voice was a slow, hoarse drawl. "What are you doing here?" I stammered. I was just curious." He stared at me for a long time with a strange expression, then chuckled softly. "Curiosity can kill a person, my dear. But fine, if you want to know, I will show you." He pulled a ring of keys from his pocket and unlocked the basement. The heavy door groaned open, emitting a ghastly creaking sound. A musty, damp smell hit me, almost making me gag. Inside, it was pitch black, illuminated only by the small flashlight he carried. Trembling, I followed him down the old wooden steps. The sound of our footsteps echoed in the cramped space, heightening my panic. When we reached the bottom, I froze. Before me was a large cellar. The walls were covered with old, yellowed photographs. There were pictures of young women, pictures of children, all of them with expressions of terror and confusion. Some of the photos were stained with dark splotches that looked disturbingly like old blood. My legs went weak and I stumbled back. Mr. Blackwood remained still, his gaze fixed on the pictures. His voice was trembling but hauntingly clear. "This is my secret, and this is why I had to marry you. You are the final piece." I was horrified, my heart pounding erratically. I wanted to scream, but my throat was tight. I didn't understand what the final piece meant. He turned to me, his smile twisted, his cloudy eyes glinting with a bizarre light. "Do you know why my first wife died so young? Why my children never came back?" He paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. "It all started in this cellar." I collapsed onto the cold, hard floor, my heart feeling like it had stopped. In that instant, I realized I had fallen into a maze far more terrifying than any nightmare. The secret Mr. Blackwood carried wasn't just a story. It was a chain of crimes buried under layers of time. And from that moment on, I knew my life would never be peaceful again. I sat crumpled on the cold basement floor, my legs trembling uncontrollably, my breath coming in ragged gasps, as if I'd just escaped a nightmare. But this wasn't a dream. It was a raw, brutal reality I never thought I'd have to confront. The photographs hanging all over the walls, yellowed with age, all shared one thing: eyes filled with an unspeakable terror. With a shaking hand, I pointed at them and stammered, Who, who are they, sir?" Mr. Blackwood stood silent for a long time, his dull eyes never leaving the pictures. The beam from his flashlight danced across his aged face, deepening the wrinkles into chasms filled with 1,000 ghosts. After a moment, he let out a low sigh, his voice deep and raspy. "They are the people who have passed through my life. They haven't disappeared. They are just buried here with me." His words made my skin crawl. I wanted to scramble to my feet, run up the stairs, and escape this suffocating space, but my legs were useless. I asked hesitantly, my throat dry, "You mean they're dead?" He turned to look at me, a distorted smirk playing on his lips. He didn't answer directly, just gave a slow nod. That look froze me. My heart hammered wildly. Every muscle in my body was tense, ready to snap. Suddenly, I remembered the whispers I'd heard about Mr. Blackwood. His wife died young. His children left one by one, never to return. People knew he was rich and powerful, but they also said he lived in his grand house like a cursed man. Now, standing before these pictures, I felt like I was finding the missing pieces of a dark puzzle. Perhaps the deaths of those women weren't accidental, and his children's departure wasn't simply a move abroad. I recoiled, my back hitting the damp, cold wall. A shiver ran down my spine.
I stammered. "Then why did you bring me down here? What do I have to do with them?" Mr. Blackwood was silent. Then he started walking towards me. He leaned on his cane, each step heavy, his eyes locked on my face. I shrank back, my hands clenching the fabric of my dress so tightly my nails dug into my skin. When he was just a few feet away, he stopped and leaned down to whisper, "Because you are the final piece, the one chosen for me." My heart seized, a chilling cold spreading through me. Chosen? Chosen by who? Why me? Questions flooded my mind, but my throat was so constricted I couldn't speak them. Just then, footsteps echoed from the top of the stairs. I flinched and looked up. Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper, was standing there, holding a candle. Her face was emotionless, her gaze cold as she looked down at us. Her voice was slow and measured. "Mr. Blackwood, you shouldn't have told her so soon." Mr. Blackwood narrowed his eyes, his voice trembling in response. "It's time she knew. I can't hide it forever." I looked from one to the other, utterly bewildered. It was clear Mrs. Gable knew everything. "What are you hiding?" I finally burst into tears, my voice choked with sobs. "I don't understand. Why me? Why my mother married me to you? What is all of this?" Mr. Blackwood stared at me for a long time, then glanced at Mrs. Gable. They exchanged a look, an unspoken communication passing between them. Finally, he spoke, his voice as heavy as stone. "Because your mother once stepped into this cellar, too." His words left me stunned. My ears rang and my heart pounded. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mother? She knew about this place? And if she had been down here, how could she have been so cruel as to marry me off, to push me into her own past nightmare? I covered my face and sobbed, my throat raw with pain. Mrs. Gable descended a few steps, her voice steady but laced with ice. "Miss Lily, nothing in this world happens by chance. Your mother chose this path many years ago, and you are just following in her footsteps." Her statement was a knife that tore through me. I shook my head, screaming, "No, I don't believe it. My mother, she couldn't do this to me." Mr. Blackwood narrowed his eyes and gave a sad, small laugh. Then he turned and, leaning on his cane, started back towards the stairs. His voice echoed in the dark space. "You will understand soon enough. But remember, never try to leave this house, because if you go, your mother will have to pay the price." I sat helplessly on the floor, shaking all over, tears streaming down my face. I felt like a bird trapped in a cage with no way out. My mother, the one person who should have protected me, was the reason I was now in this hell. I hated her, I pitied her, and I was desperate to know the truth, yet terrified of it at the same time. That night, back in my room, I couldn't sleep. The images of the old photographs, Mr. Blackwood's terrifying gaze, and Mrs. Gable's cryptic words haunted me. I began to see the house not just as cold, but as a giant coffin, imprisoning me with a host of ghosts from the past. The next morning, I decided I had to contact my mother. I had to hear the truth from her own lips. I grabbed my phone and called, but she didn't answer. I called again and again, and finally she picked up, her tone curt. "What is it, Lily? Are you not happy with your new life?" I choked back a sob. "Mom, did you know? Did you know about the cellar in his house? Were you ever down there?" There was a long silence on the other end. I held my breath, waiting. Finally, her voice came, trembling. "Lily, don't ask any more. Some things are better left unknown. Just be a good girl and listen to him, and you'll be fine." Then she hung up. The cold dial tone was like a hammer blow to my head. I sank to the floor, tears blurring my vision. It was true. My mother knew, and she still pushed me into this horrifying vortex. A single question screamed in my mind. What secret was hidden in that cellar that made even my own mother bow her head in submission, forcing me to become the final piece? I knew I couldn't stop here. I had to dig deeper, to find the truth no matter how terrifying it might be. And in that moment, I had no idea that my determination to uncover the secret would unleash a chain of tragedies even more horrifying than my darkest nightmares. That day, my body felt completely drained. I sat slumped by the window, staring out at the overgrown garden, my mind a tangled mess. From the moment my mother hung up, I knew I was utterly alone. The mother I had trusted, the one I thought would protect me forever, had hidden a monstrous secret and pushed me into the arms of an 80-year-old man with a cellar full of ghosts. My only option was to unravel the truth myself. Every time I recalled Mrs. Gable's gaze or Mr. Blackwood's cloudy eyes, my heart seized with a sharp pain. His words, "the final piece," echoed in my head, driving me mad with confusion. That afternoon, Mr. Blackwood summoned me to the living room. He was already seated in his large wooden chair, a pipe clenched between his trembling fingers. His eyes scrutinized me with a mix of pity and assessment. He spoke in a low voice. "You called your mother, didn't you?" I froze, shocked that he knew. He let out a dry, rattling laugh. "I told you, nothing in this house escapes my notice. Don't think you can hide anything from me." I bit my lip, swallowing my fear, and gathered all my courage. "Then what is the secret? Why did my mother know about it and still marry me to you?" Mr. Blackwood set his pipe down and looked directly at me. His eyes suddenly shone with an unusual light, as if he were mustering his last ounce of strength to speak. "Because your mother owes this house a promise." My heart constricted. "A promise? What promise?" I asked, my voice trembling. Before he could answer, a violent coughing fit seized him. He doubled over, clutching his chest, his whole body shaking. Mrs. Gable rushed in from the kitchen with a glass of water. She shot me a cold look, as if to say, "Don't ask any more." I stood there, helpless. After the coughing subsided, Mr. Blackwood was left breathless, his voice even hoarser. "If you want to know, you must witness it. Tonight, I will take you down to the cellar again. But prepare yourself, because after you see it, there will be no turning back." I felt paralyzed. I was terrified, but also desperate to know what I was about to face. It felt like an invisible hand was pushing me towards a cliff's edge. Night fell. The sky was black, covered in thick clouds, and the wind howled through the cracks in the windows like a mournful cry. Mr. Blackwood, leaning on his cane, beckoned me to follow. Mrs. Gable silently held a lamp behind us. The three of us slowly descended into the cellar.
The heavy door groaned open, and the musty smell once again filled the air. This time, Mr. Blackwood didn't stop at the photographs on the wall. He led me deeper, to a dark corner where a large wooden chest sat, bound with a rusted iron lock. He pulled an old key from his coat pocket and slowly opened it. The click of the lock echoed coldly, as if opening a door to another world. When the lid sprang open, I was stunned. Inside were thick, voluminous notebooks with yellowed paper, along with countless old trinkets, pieces of jewelry, handkerchiefs embroidered with women's names, and even several locks of dried, brittle hair. A nauseating feeling churned in my stomach. Mr. Blackwood tremblingly picked up a notebook and handed it to me. "Read this, then you will understand why you must be here." I flipped through the pages, my eyes glued to the slanted, desperate handwriting. It was a diary. The pages chronicled the cries of a woman. The more I read, the colder I became. The entries described a life of solitude and fear, of being trapped in this house, forced into strange rituals, and haunted by sleepless, terrifying nights. The writer repeatedly mentioned the Blackwood family curse, that each generation required a young woman to enter the family and bear its secret. I looked up, trembling. "Whose is this?" Mr. Blackwood stared directly into my eyes, his voice hoarse. "It belonged to my wife, your aunt, Dahlia." I froze, my body turning to ice. His words were like a lightning strike. I quickly flipped back through the pages and saw the signature at the end, Dahlia. It was a familiar name, one I'd heard in my mother's stories, the story of her older sister who had died young from a mysterious illness years ago. I collapsed, tears streaming down my face. So my mother knew everything. She had witnessed her own sister fall into this abyss, and then she led me down the exact same path. I screamed, my voice breaking. Why? Why would my mother be so cruel? Mr. Blackwood sighed, his gaze lost in the distance. "Because she had no choice. You don't understand. This house has trapped our entire family in a circle with no escape. Any young woman who enters is just the next link in the chain. No one dares to fight it." I clutched my head, sobbing uncontrollably. My entire world felt like it was crumbling. Everything I had ever believed in. Mrs. Gable finally spoke, her voice cold but tinged with sorrow. "Miss Lily, it's useless to blame your mother. She just chose the path of least pain. If she hadn't married you to Mr. Blackwood, she might have had to take your place herself." I was choked with grief, unable to speak. My heart felt like it was being squeezed, filled with both pain and rage. I hated my mother, but at the same time, I was terrified for her. If Mrs. Gable was right, then my mother was just another victim in this cruel cycle. Mr. Blackwood closed the diary, his voice as heavy as the night wind. "Now you understand why I called you the final piece. You are not here to be my wife. You are here to end this cycle." His words left me speechless. End the cycle? What did that mean? And why me? He looked at me, his eyes shining with a strange, fierce light. "Only you can do it, but the price to be paid is not small." My body trembled. I didn't dare ask more. His words hung over me like a death sentence, ready to fall at any moment. That night, back in my room, I sat motionless until dawn. Every word, every image from the cellar was seared into my mind. I knew there was no turning back. I had to choose, accept my fate or find a way to break it. But if I broke it, would I survive? And what would happen to my mother? A fierce determination rose within me. I couldn't let myself be imprisoned like my Aunt Dahlia. I couldn't let my mother live forever in fear. I had to find the ultimate truth and, above all, find a way to escape this horrifying curse. I didn't know where the path ahead would lead, but I knew that everything was just beginning. I sat frozen in the silent room, my eyes staring blankly into space. Outside, rain began to fall, each heavy drop tapping against the old roof tiles, a rhythm for the despair churning in my chest. Mr. Blackwood's words haunted me. You are the final piece. You must end the cycle. End it how? And what was the price he spoke of? I felt trapped in a labyrinth with no exit. On one side was the absolute terror of the cellar and its vicious cycle. On the other, a shattered bond with my mother. I despised her, yet my heart ached for her. It turned out she too had been forced into silence, forced to bow to the darkness enveloping our family. But she had chosen to sacrifice me for her own safety. The pain was sharp and bitter, like my heart had been steeped in salt water. I didn't sleep all night. When the pale morning light filtered into the room, I rose, my eyes dark and swollen, determined to uncover the truth no matter the cost. I couldn't just sit here and wait like a lamb for the slaughter. If I was truly the final piece, then I needed to know what puzzle I was meant to complete. That afternoon, I found Mrs. Gable. I cornered her as she was sweeping the back patio. My voice was shaky but resolute. Mrs. Gable, please, you have to tell me, what is this cycle? Why does a young woman have to enter this house every generation? Mrs. Gable stopped, the broom frozen mid-air. She stared at me for a long time, her expression wavering. Finally, she let out a heavy sigh. Miss Lily, some things, once known, will never let you live in peace. But if you truly want to know, I will tell you. My heart leaped. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Mrs. Gable sat down on a wooden bench, her voice slow and heavy, as if dredging up a buried past. Mr. Blackwood wasn't always the fearsome man he is now. In his youth, he was brilliant, with a vast empire in his hands. But then, an accident happened. One of his construction sites collapsed. Dozens of people died, including women and children. The rumors started then that it wasn't just an accident, but karma. The vengeful spirits of the dead had returned to claim their due. After that, his family began to fall apart. His wife, your Aunt Dahlia, became strange. She couldn't sleep, claimed there were people walking in the house at all hours. She wrote those things in the diary you read. And then, one night, she was gone. A night of blood. My entire body went cold, my heart seeming to stop. I asked in a trembling whisper, "You mean she was murdered?" Mrs. Gable shook her head, her voice choked. No one knows for sure. When they found her, she was lying lifeless in the cellar, surrounded by those pictures you saw. Mr. Blackwood said she took her own life, but I never believed it. I clutched my chest, my breathing ragged. The scene played out in my mind, so haunting it felt like I was the one trapped in that cellar. Mrs. Gable continued. From then on, Mr. Blackwood became obsessed with the idea of a curse.
He believed that to free his family, a young woman had to enter the house to bear the weight of that hatred. After his wife died, his children left one by one. He thought the only way was to choose an outsider. And your mother, she agreed. Tears streamed down my face. My mother knew everything, and yet she still threw me into this deadly path. I clenched my fists, overwhelmed with anger and despair. And the final piece?
I asked through my sobs. Mrs. Gable looked at me with pity. That is you. He believes that if someone is willing to stand in for the family, to accept all the blame, then this cycle will end. But whether it will truly end, or if it's all just the delusion of a broken man, I cannot say. Her words were a devastating blow. It all felt like a black curtain suffocating me with no way out. I was trapped, forced to make a life or death choice. That evening, as Mr. Blackwood sat brooding in his wooden chair, I decided to confront him one last time. I knelt before him, tears streaming down my face. "What do you want me to do? Tell me. I can't live in this vague terror any longer." Mr. Blackwood looked at me, a strange light flickering in his cloudy eyes. He placed a trembling hand on my shoulder, his voice a hoarse rasp. "You must go down to the cellar, and you must stay there for one night. You must face what is buried there. You must hear their voices. You must accept the truth. Only then can the curse be broken." My mouth fell open in horror. Stay in that cellar for a whole night, with those pictures, those bizarre objects, and the ghosts of the past? It felt like he was throwing me to the wolves. "And if I don't?" I asked, shaking. Mr. Blackwood's gaze turned sharper than I had ever seen it. His voice dropped to a terrifying whisper. "Then you and your mother will not leave this place alive." His words were a dagger to my heart. I knew then that I had no other choice. I had to accept. That night, Mrs. Gable brought me a single candle and placed it in my hand. She looked at me with immense pity. "Miss Lily, be strong tonight. If you hear anything, do not answer. If you see anything, do not run. Just keep this candle lit until morning, and you will survive." I was trembling violently, but took the candle. The cellar door creaked open, and the darkness swallowed me whole. I descended the steps one by one, my palms sweating, my breath catching in my throat. When the door slammed shut behind me, I knew I was trapped in the dark with the terrifying past of this house. The candle in my hand flickered, its wavering light dancing across the yellowed photographs. The faces in the pictures seemed to be staring at me, their eyes following my every move. I heard the wind whistling through a crack in the wall, but mixed within it was a faint but distinct whisper, as if someone was standing right behind me, calling my name. "Lily." My blood ran cold, my heart threatening to burst from my chest. I whipped around, but there was only the damp stone wall. No one was there. The candle flickered, its light jumping across the open pages of the old diary on a table. Shaking, I stepped closer, my eyes catching a line of hastily scrawled words. "If anyone reads this, free us. Let it end here." I was paralyzed, my throat was dry, my body shaking. The whisper came again, this time right next to my ear. "You are the last one." I screamed, the sound echoing through the cellar, but the only answer was the dull echo of my own voice, mixed with the crackling of the candle, as if the past was coming alive in the dead of night. The cellar door slammed shut behind me, the sound of the lock clicking into place sealing my fate. I clutched the candle, its small, trembling flame casting a weak circle of light in front of me. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decay, and a chill from the stone walls seeped into my bones, making me shiver. My heart pounded a heavy, frantic rhythm against my ribs, a drumbeat signaling the arrival of a storm. I backed into a corner, sinking to the floor, my eyes fixed on the photographs that littered the walls. In the flickering candlelight, the faces seemed to come alive, their eyes boring into me. I squeezed my eyes shut, telling myself it was just an illusion. But then a sudden, cold gust of wind swept through the cellar, nearly extinguishing the flame. In that breeze, I heard it clearly. A soft whisper. "Lily, don't trust them." I snapped my eyes open and looked around wildly, but the cellar was still, silent, except for the rhythmic drip, drip, drip of water somewhere in the darkness. I clutched my chest, trying to breathe. I must be imagining things, my mind playing tricks on me from the stress. But then another sound broke the silence, coming from the corner of the cellar. I whipped my head around. The large wooden chest Mr. Blackwood had opened was vibrating slightly, making a soft creaking noise. I bit my lip and slowly approached it. The candlelight illuminated its stained surface, revealing small cracks that seemed to be spreading. Suddenly, the lid popped open a crack. The old notebooks inside shifted, and one of them tumbled out, falling open on the floor, its pages fluttering in an unseen draft. I bent down, my gaze falling on the words that appeared before me. Whoever enters here is a substitute. A cold dread washed over me, and my hands started to shake. Those few words hit me like a physical blow. I slammed the notebook shut, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. A substitute? A substitute for whom? For the vengeful spirits buried here, or for Mr. Blackwood's dead wife? The candle suddenly sputtered and died, plunging me into absolute darkness. I screamed, the sound swallowed by the suffocating silence. I fumbled desperately for my matches, my hands trembling. When I finally struck one, the flare of light illuminated the opposite wall. I froze. The pictures on the wall were no longer old and yellowed. They had transformed into new faces, and among them was my own. My mouth fell open, my mind reeling. It was a picture of me in my wedding dress, my face a mask of terror, exactly as I had looked on the day I entered this house. "No, it can't be," I whispered, my voice trembling. Just then, I heard footsteps behind me. I spun around. No one was there, but the sound continued, a steady, rhythmic tread drawing closer. I scrambled backward until my back hit the wall. A shadowy figure emerged from the gloom, illuminated by the faint matchlight. It was a woman with long hair, a pale face, and deep, hollow eyes. My body went rigid, my heart stopping. The figure moved slowly towards me, its lips moving. "Lily, I am Dahlia." I was paralyzed with terror. Dahlia, the name from the diary, my aunt, Mr. Blackwood's first wife. I pressed myself against the wall. What do you want from me?" I stammered. The apparition stopped right in front of me, reaching out a cold, translucent hand to touch my shoulder. A shock like electricity shot through me. Her voice was faint, as if coming from a great distance. "Escape before it's too late."
Don't let my tragedy be repeated. He doesn't want to end the curse. He wants to find a replacement so he can be at peace. Her words tore through the darkness. I was stunned, a chilling realization dawning on me. It was all a lie. Mr. Blackwood didn't want to free anyone. He just wanted to find someone to take his place, to bear the burden of his sins so he could finally rest. Before I could react, Aunt Dahlia's form dissolved into the air, leaving only a cold void. The match went out. This time, the darkness was thick and suffocating, like a wet blanket pressing down on me. I collapsed to the floor, tears streaming down my face. I understood now that I had been trapped from the very beginning. A soft weeping sound started somewhere in the cellar. It began faintly, then grew louder, clearer, as if a chorus of voices was surrounding me. The voices of women, of children, all blending into a symphony of sorrow. I covered my ears and screamed, "Enough! I don't want to hear any more." But the weeping persisted. Suddenly, I felt an icy chill on my back. A familiar voice, trembling and broken, whispered my name. "Lily, it's Mom." I froze and spun around. A faint figure flickered in the darkness. It was my mother, her face gaunt, her eyes filled with tears. I reached out a trembling hand. "Mom, how are you here?"
But she didn't answer, just shook her head and faded back into the shadows. I scrambled after her, crying out her name, but my hands met only the cold stone of the walls. In complete despair, I collapsed, my heart shattering. I finally understood. This cellar didn't just imprison restless spirits, it imprisoned the hearts of the living. It twisted everything into illusions, making it impossible to tell what was real and what was a lie. The sound of a key turning in the lock echoed from above. The cellar door slowly creaked open, letting in the pale light of dawn. I staggered to my feet and stumbled out, feeling as though I had just returned from the land of the dead. Mr. Blackwood was standing at the top of the stairs, leaning on his cane, watching me. His eyes were calculating, a strange, triumphant smile twisting his lips. "Good, you survived. That means you are the one to bear the burden. From now on, the cycle has its substitute." His words confirmed it. Everything Aunt Dahlia had said was true. He didn't want to end it, he just wanted a replacement. And that replacement was me. I clenched my fists, fighting the tremors that racked my body. In that moment, a fire ignited in my heart. I would not be his prey. I had to find a way to escape this house, to expose the truth, no matter the cost. I lifted my head and stared directly into Mr. Blackwood's cloudy eyes, whispering silently to myself, "You chose the wrong person. I will not be your substitute." And from that moment, I knew the real fight was just beginning. I left the cellar on trembling legs, each step feeling as if it were weighted with lead. On the ground floor, the morning light streamed in, but it brought no comfort. Instead, it made everything paler, colder than ever before. Mr. Blackwood stood like a statue at the top of the stairs, his cloudy eyes seeming to pierce right through me. He smiled, that twisted, malevolent smile. "You survived, Lily. From now on, you will carry this burden from me." I was frozen, my heart hammering against my ribs. I understood that surviving the night wasn't my salvation, it was my condemnation. He intended to imprison me forever in the role of the scapegoat. The words of my Aunt Dahlia echoed in my ears. He only wants to find a replacement. I clenched my hands until my nails dug into my palms. The sharp pain brought me back to my senses. I knew I couldn't trust him. If I obeyed, I would slowly rot in this house, my life force drained away just like Aunt Dahlia's. And one day, I too would become another soulless photograph on the wall. Back in my room, I locked the door and sank to the floor, tears of despair falling freely. With every passing second, I could feel an invisible noose tightening around my neck. But in the midst of that hopelessness, an idea sparked. I had to escape. I had to get out of this house, and soon. I began to meticulously observe every corner of the mansion. The main entrance was always guarded, especially at night. The windows were all fitted with sturdy iron bars. But there was one possible way out, a side door leading to the back garden, where only a decaying wooden fence separated the property from a small path outside. I had seen neighborhood children run past it while playing. The fence couldn't be that high. A plan began to form. I would wait until midnight, when everyone was asleep, and slip out. I couldn't take much, just some cash and my ID. But then a pang of fear for my mother shot through me. If I left, would Mr. Blackwood take his revenge on her? Would he really harm her as he had threatened? I was torn, but then I remembered the haunted, gaunt face of my mother in the vision I'd had in the cellar. Even if it was just an illusion, it was burned into my mind. My mother had been here. She knew the truth, yet she chose silence to save herself. I could not follow that path. If I accepted this fate, my entire life would be consumed by darkness. I had to leave, and if I could, I would find a way to come back and save my mother from Mr. Blackwood's grip. That afternoon, when Mrs. Gable brought my tea, I feigned calmness, but inside I was a nervous wreck. I watched her closely. She wasn't a cruel person. Her eyes often betrayed a sense of pity. Perhaps she was also a victim of this house. An idea flashed through my mind. What if I asked for her help? As she was about to leave, I quickly grabbed her arm. "Mrs. Gable," I whispered, "I want to leave this place. Please tell me how I can get out." She froze, her eyes widening in surprise before quickly darkening. She shook her head, her voice firm. "Miss Lily, don't be foolish. You can't escape. Many others before you have tried. You've seen the result." Tears welled in my eyes as I squeezed her hand tighter. "I don't want to die slowly in this house. I'm still young. I want to live my own life. Please, just a little help." Her expression wavered. For a fleeting moment, I saw tears glisten in the corners of her eyes. After a long silence, she sighed heavily. "If you are truly determined to go, goes only one way. At midnight, when the clock strikes 12, Mr. Blackwood will be in his deepest sleep. At that time, make your way to the back garden, to the wooden fence. But remember, no matter what you hear, do not turn back." Her warning sent my heart into a frenzy. I nodded quickly, thanking her through choked sobs. She just waved her hand dismissively, her eyes sad. "If you make it out, don't ever come back. This house has no place for returnees." Night fell. I sat on my bed, my heart pounding in time with the ticking of the grandfather clock. Each tick felt like it was tearing through the silence of the night. I tucked a few small items into my pocket. The dim bedside lamp cast a faint glow on my pale face, but my eyes shone with determination. When the clock struck its 12th chime, I took a deep breath and quietly opened my door. The hallway was empty, only the sound of the wind whistling through a window crack. I moved slowly, each step feeling like I was walking on needles. Downstairs, I crept along the corridor to the back garden. The side door, thankfully, was only latched, not locked. I lifted the bar, and the door opened with a soft creak. The cool, fresh air of freedom washed over me. I breathed it in deeply, my heart trembling. In front of me was the rotting wooden fence. I started to climb, but just then a voice from behind me froze me to the spot. "Lily, trying to run away?" I turned. Mr. Blackwood was standing in the shadows, his cloudy eyes glowing like two ghostly flames. He leaned on his cane, his voice a low, raspy growl that seemed to come from the depths of hell. "I told you, no one leaves this place. Did you think you were the exception?" My whole body shook. I grabbed the fence and scrambled up with all my might. But at that moment, a freezing gust of wind swept past me, and the oil lamp on the porch flickered and died. In the darkness, a chorus of whispers rose around me. "Stay, stay with us." I was panicked, sweat beading on my forehead. But in that instant, I heard Mrs. Gable's voice, urgent and trembling, seemingly from nowhere. "Miss Lily, don't look back, just go." I gritted my teeth and threw myself over the fence, ignoring the sharp splinters that tore at my skin. When my feet hit the dirt path outside, I collapsed, gasping for air. I didn't dare look back. I just ran until my legs gave out. But deep down, I knew I wasn't free. Mr. Blackwood's hoarse voice echoed in my head. "No one leaves this place. No one." And I had a chilling premonition that the real nightmare was still waiting for me up ahead. I fled into the darkness, my legs screaming in protest, but I ran like a mad woman. The uneven dirt path was littered with sharp rocks and thorns that cut into my bare feet, but I felt nothing but pure, unadulterated terror. The night wind whipped at my face, my hair flying wildly, my ragged breaths mixing with the frantic pounding of my heart. A single thought consumed me: get as far away from that house as possible. Yet, no matter how long I ran, I felt like I hadn't gone far at all. The path ahead seemed to twist back on itself, a confusing loop.
The trees along the side of the road began to look familiar, the same bends reappearing, as if I were trapped in a maze. Panic set in, and a cold sweat drenched my back. In my fear, I thought I heard the sound of footsteps behind me, slow and steady. I glanced back. Nothing, just the dark, silent night and the menacing shapes of the trees. But the sound persisted, matching my own pace. I wanted to scream, but my throat was closed tight. Then, through the trees, I saw a faint yellow light ahead. It was a small cottage, its door slightly ajar. I felt a surge of relief, like a drowning person spotting a piece of driftwood. I scrambled towards it and banged on the door, my voice cracking. "Please, is anyone there? Help me." The door opened slowly. A frail, elderly woman with silver hair and deep-set eyes looked out at me. She wore a faded brown dress and held a trembling oil lamp. Her gaze was strange, hard to read, as she stared at me. "Ma'am," I choked out, "please, can I just stay for one night?" The old woman studied me for a long moment, then gave a silent nod and opened the door wider. I stumbled inside, my legs nearly giving out. The cottage was simple, smelling of wood smoke. I sank onto a wooden chair, my hands still shaking. The old woman poured me a cup of water, her voice low and slow. "You came from the house at the end of the road, didn't you, child?" Her question made my blood run cold. I managed a shaking nod. The woman sighed, her eyes distant. "I've lived here my whole life. I've seen many girls like you. No one who enters that house ever truly escape." My heart seized. Her words were like daggers twisting in my mind. I broke down, sobbing, and told her everything. The forced marriage, the dark cellar, Mr. Blackwood's whispers, the vision of my aunt, and my desperate flight. I spoke without stopping, needing to pour out all the horror that had been bottled up inside me. The old woman listened in silence, a deep sadness in her eyes. When I finished, she nodded slowly. "What you've been through? I've heard similar stories from the others before you. But you are luckier than them. You are still alive to tell the tale." "What do I do now?" I asked, trembling. "I don't want to go back, but he threatened my mother." The woman closed her eyes and sighed. "That's right. He will not let you go easily. The more you run, the more he will chase you. That house is like a trap. Once you step inside, it's nearly impossible to get out. There is only one way to be free. You must cut it off at the root." "Cut it off at the root? What does that mean?" I sobbed. She looked at me, her eyes sharp as ice. "It means you must go back and face him." Her words left me stunned. I jumped to my feet, screaming, "No, I can't. I don't want to see him. I don't want to set foot in that cellar ever again." The old woman remained calm. "If you don't go back, he will find you. And then, not only you, but your mother as well will be in danger. You can hide for a night or two, but you cannot hide for the rest of your life." Tears streamed down my face. I collapsed, feeling utterly hopeless. Even after escaping, I was not free. The shadow of that house still loomed over me, binding me to its tragic fate. The woman slowly retrieved a small box from a drawer and handed it to me. Inside was a half-burnt black candle and a small folded piece of paper with faded ink. It read, "The last one must be the one to light the candle in the darkness and speak the truth." My hand shook as I held the paper. The woman explained, "This was left by a girl who survived. She believed that only by lighting this black candle in the cellar and confronting everything could the cycle be broken. But no one has ever had the courage to do it." I sat there, stunned, the note trembling in my hand. It felt like I was being backed into a corner, forced to choose once again: return to that house to face my demons, or continue to run in fear,
leaving my mother and myself at the mercy of Mr. Blackwood. That night, lying on the old woman's rickety cot, I stared into the darkness. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mr. Blackwood's cloudy gaze, heard my aunt's cries, my mother's desperate call. It was suffocating. As dawn approached, I made my decision. I would go back.
Not because I wanted to, but because I had no other choice. I had to end this cycle, once and for all. The next morning, I knelt and thanked the old woman. She placed a hand on my shoulder, her voice filled with a distant sadness. "My child, I cannot go with you, but remember, only the truth can set you free." I clutched the box with the black candle and walked out of the small cottage. The dirt path stretched before me, but this time I wasn't running away. I walked slowly, deliberately, my heart filled with both fear and a burning determination. When the old iron gates of the mansion came into view, my heart clenched. The house stood there, cold and imposing, like a great beast waiting for its prey. But the old woman's words echoed in my mind. The last one must be the one to light the candle in the darkness and speak the truth. I knew my real battle had only just begun. I stood before the heavy iron gates of the mansion, my hand clutching the small box containing the black candle. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. The smell of rust and the cold air emanating from within made me feel like I was standing at the mouth of a monster. A part of me screamed to turn and run, but my feet were planted. I knew if I didn't face this now, I would be haunted for the rest of my life, and my mother would never be safe. The gates groaned as I pushed them open. The garden was eerily silent, the wind whispering through the trees with a dry, rustling sound like dried blood. I walked slowly, feeling like a condemned prisoner on my way to the gallows. On the porch steps, Mr. Blackwood was already waiting. His frail figure leaned on his cane, his cloudy eyes fixed on me. A twisted smile spread across his wrinkled face, a look of both mockery and triumph. "I knew you would come back. No one can escape this place, Lily." I clenched my fists, the box in my pocket feeling hot against my skin. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "I didn't come back to obey you. I came back to end this." Mr. Blackwood let out a rattling laugh that echoed across the yard. "End this? You think you can? You're just a weak little girl. All the ones before you failed. You will be no different." I looked him straight in the eye. "No," I said firmly, "I will not be your substitute. I will be the last one." For a moment, I saw his smile falter. His eyes narrowed, a flash of anger in their depths. But then he fell silent, turned, and slowly walked back into the house. His voice drifted back to me. "If that's what you want, then follow me to the cellar." I swallowed hard and followed him. The hallway was dark, the air thick with the scent of incense. The faint yellow light cast long shadows on the old walls. Each footstep echoed like a funeral drum. I felt like I was descending into hell. The cellar door opened once more, and the familiar darkness enveloped me. Mr. Blackwood leapt away, his tall, thin figure like a phantom guiding me. I followed, my trembling hands taking the black candle from the box. When I lit it, the space seemed to shiver. The black flame flickered, casting eerie, dancing shadows on the photographs, making them seem terrifyingly alive. Suddenly, the whispers began again, more urgent than ever before. The voices of women, of children, a cacophony of cries mixed with mocking laughter. I clutched the candle, my ears ringing. Amidst the chaos, my Aunt Dahlia's voice rose clearly. "Lily, speak the truth. It's the only way to be free." I trembled, my lips moving. What truth? Mr. Blackwood spun around, his eyes bloodshot. He hissed, "Be quiet. Don't listen to them. They're just spirits, illusions." I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. "No, they're not illusions. They are the souls you buried here. They're all crying for help."
Mr. Blackwood roared, slamming his cane on the floor. I did what I had to do to protect this family. Without me, our line would have been cursed into extinction. Protect? I screamed in despair, my voice cracking. You killed your own wife. You drove your children away. And now you want to make me your scapegoat so you can have peace? That's not protection. That's a crime. My voice echoed through the cellar, mingling with the now furious whispers. The photographs on the walls rattled, and several fell, shattering on the ground. The black candle in my hand flared violently, the flame shooting higher, illuminating Mr. Blackwood's face and twisting it into a monstrous mask. He stumbled backward, his eyes wide with terror. "No, stop talking. You'll destroy us all." But I couldn't stop. I screamed, releasing all my pent-up rage and grief. "The truth is, you used this so-called curse to hide your own guilt. The truth is, you just wanted someone to die in your place. But I will not accept it. I will not let this cycle continue." As the words left my mouth, the entire cellar began to shake violently. The red candles on the walls all blew out at once, leaving only the fierce light of the black candle. The cries, the laughter, the wails all rose to a deafening crescendo, as if hundreds of souls were being released at once. Mr. Blackwood collapsed, his trembling hands clawing at the floor. His face was ashen, his eyes wide with horror. "No, stop talking. You'll destroy us all." But I couldn't stop. I screamed, releasing all my pent-up rage and grief. "The truth is, you used this so-called curse to hide your own guilt. The truth is, you just wanted someone to die in your place. But I will not accept it. I will not let this cycle continue." As the words left my mouth, the entire cellar began to shake violently. The red candles on the walls all blew out at once, leaving only the fierce light of the black candle. The cries, the laughter, the wails all rose to a deafening crescendo, as if hundreds of souls were being released at once. Mr. Blackwood collapsed, his trembling hands clawing at the floor. His face was ashen, his eyes wide with horror. "No," she shrieked. "Don't leave me. I did it all for you." But the sounds in the cellar drowned out his cries. The black flame in my hand flared one last time, then went out. Darkness fell, but it was no longer terrifying. Instead, I felt a profound stillness, as if a weight that had been pressing down for decades had finally been lifted. When I opened my eyes, Mr. Blackwood was lying motionless on the floor, his cane cast aside. His breathing was shallow, his cloudy eyes looking at me like something that resembled regret. His voice was a faint, broken whisper. Perhaps I was wrong. Live for all of them. With those words, he closed his eyes. A single tear rolled down his wrinkled face, and then he was still. I knelt, tears falling freely. Despite my hatred for him, my heart felt heavy. He had lived his whole life haunted by his own madness, and in the end, he died a lonely, broken old man. The cellar was now strangely quiet. The broken photographs, the burned notebooks, it all seemed to have vanished with him. I clenched my fists and took a long, shaky breath. I knew the cycle was finally broken. I walked out of the cellar and into the morning light. For the first time, the warmth of the sun felt like salvation. Mrs. Gable was standing in the hallway, her eyes red. She looked at me and nodded slowly. "You did it," she whispered. "It's all over." I looked at her, tears rolling down my cheeks, and replied softly, "No, this is just the beginning, because now I have to find myself again, and my mother." I knew the road ahead would be long, but at least I had escaped this hell. And I swore to myself that I would never let anyone else fall into that terrifying cycle ever again. I emerged from the cellar, my body heavy, my legs unsteady, each step a struggle. The morning light spilling into the old hallway was blinding, but it also felt like salvation after a long, unending nightmare. A sense of relief washed over me that the cycle was broken, yet it was mingled with a heavy sadness. Mr. Blackwood's death brought no triumph, only a strange, empty ache. He had lived his life imprisoned by his own guilt and fear, and death was perhaps his only escape. But for me, it was the start of a new journey. Mrs. Gable stood at the end of the hall, her eyes red-rimmed, her hands twisting the fabric of her apron. When she saw me, she walked over and took my hand. Her voice was thick with emotion. "Miss Lily, you finally did it. Those poor souls can finally rest." I looked at her, fresh tears welling up. "But my mother," I whispered. "I have to face her. I need to know everything." Mrs. Gable sighed, her gaze distant. "Yes, it's time you ask your mother directly. She is the only one who can tell you the whole truth." Her words pierced my heart. I knew, no matter how painful, it was a confrontation I had to face. From the very beginning, my mother had been the one to push me into this horrifying ordeal. I packed a small bag. Before leaving, I took one last look at the house. The mansion stood silently in the daylight, its peaceful facade hiding a history of blood and tears. I sighed softly, promising myself I would never return. The journey to my mother's house was long. With every step, Mr. Blackwood's final words echoed in my mind. Perhaps I was wrong. Live for all of them. His confession felt like both an apology and a burden passed onto my shoulders. When I arrived, my mother was in the small kitchen. She looked thinner, her face gaunt, her eyes tired. The moment she saw me, she gasped, dropping the cup she was holding. I stepped inside, my eyes red, my voice shaking. "Mother, I'm back." She stammered in disbelief. "Lily, how are you still alive?" Her question was a knife in my heart. I laughed, a bitter, broken sound, as tears streamed down my face. "Yes, I'm alive. I'm alive because I faced it all. I broke the cycle you were so afraid of. But Mother, why? Why did you push me into that hell, knowing what it was?" My mother froze, her eyes filling with tears. She collapsed onto a chair, burying her face in her hands. Her voice was muffled by sobs. "My daughter, forgive me. I had no other choice." "No other choice?" I cried out, my heart twisting in agony. "You saw what happened to Aunt Dahlia. You knew what that cellar was, yet you still sent me there. You chose $500,000 over your own daughter? Do you have any idea what I went through?" My mother wept uncontrollably, her whole body shaking. After a long time, she finally spoke, her voice raw and torn. "You don't understand. A long time ago, I was trapped just like you. When my sister, your Aunt Dahlia, was married to Mr. Blackwood, I saw with my own eyes how she wasted away, how she died in that cellar. I was terrified, but I was helpless. Afterwards, Mr. Blackwood found me and made me swear that one day I would bring someone from our family to take on the curse. If I refused, he would destroy our entire family line." I stood there, stunned. My heart ached as if it were being squeezed. "So, you were a victim too?" I stammered. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, but I was weak. I didn't dare fight back. I just gritted my teeth and lived with it until the debt came due. And when the chance to get that money came along, I told myself it was a way to pay the debt and save my own life. I was wrong, Lily. I was selfish. I made you a pawn." I clutched my chest, tears blurring my vision. I was filled with a mix of anger and pity. Everything she had done was born from fear and weakness. She wasn't brave enough to face it herself, so she pushed me forward. I sat down next to her, my voice choked. "Mother, I met Aunt Dahlia in that cellar. Her spirit spoke to me. She said only the truth could set us free. And I did it. The cycle is broken." My mother looked up, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and disbelief. "Is it true?" I nodded, my own tears still falling. "Mr. Blackwood is dead. The spirits are at peace. We don't have to bow our heads anymore." My mother burst into fresh sobs, throwing her arms around me. Her shoulders shook as she released years of pent-up fear and guilt. I cried with her for what we had lost, for my stolen youth, for my mother's weakness, and for the soul of my aunt who never had a chance to live. We sat like that for a long time, only our sobs echoing in the small kitchen. I knew forgiveness wouldn't come easily, that the wounds wouldn't heal overnight, but at least the truth was out and the cycle was over. As evening approached, my mother took my hand, her voice thick with emotion. "My child, I don't deserve to be your mother, but please, give me a chance. From now on, I will live for you, not for my own fear." I looked at her, my heart aching, but also feeling a glimmer of warmth. I nodded slowly. "I'll give you a chance, Mother, but you have to promise me you will never hide anything from me ever again." She nodded, more tears rolling down her cheeks. That evening, as the last rays of sunlight filtered through the window, I felt a rare sense of peace. The tragedy was over. It left scars that would never fade, but I knew that as long as my mother and I were together, we could rise from the ashes. And deep down, I made a silent promise to my Aunt Dahlia. "Rest in peace, Auntie. I will live for you and for all the others whose lives were stolen." In the days following my confrontation with my mother, a heavy silence hung over our small house. My mother was quiet, often sitting by the fire, her eyes lost in thought. I knew she was still haunted by the past, but at least she had confessed her part in it. As for me, though my heart was still scarred, I felt a new beginning was on the horizon. But life did not simply return to normal. The whisper started among the neighbors and relatives. News of Mr. Blackwood's death spread quickly, though no one knew the real cause. They only saw an 80-year-old man who had died alone in his mansion, leaving behind a vast unclaimed fortune. Rumors flew that his death was mysterious, that strange things had always happened in that house. And in all those speculations, my name was dragged through the mud. One morning at the market, I saw a group of women huddled together, whispering and staring at me. "That's her, Lily. They say she was Mr. Blackwood's wife. Something terrible happened on their wedding night. Yeah, I heard she ran away and then came back. There's definitely more to that story. How is it that she's fine, but he's dead?" Their words were like tiny cuts. I lowered my head and hurried past, my heart clenching. I knew these vicious rumors wouldn't die down easily, and worse, they would cause my mother more pain. When I got home, my mother was sitting by the door, her eyes red. She was trembling as she held a piece of paper that someone had slipped under the door. I took it from her. On it was a single, crudely written line. "The last one is not always the last one to be forgiven." I froze, a cold, vague fear creeping over me. Who wrote this? Was it just a cruel prank from someone in the village, or was there some other force at play that hadn't let me go? My mother looked at me, her voice shaking. "Lily, who do you think it is?" I swallowed hard, my mind racing. The images from the cellar flashed before my eyes. My aunt's spirit, the chorus of souls. Had the cycle truly ended, or was there something I had missed? That night, I sat alone in my room by the light of a dim oil lamp. I took out the half-burnt black candle. It had helped me break the cycle, so why had that note appeared? Was there still another piece of the puzzle that remained hidden? As I was lost in thought, there was a knock on the door. I jumped, my heart pounding. My mother opened it, and, to my surprise, it was Mrs. Gable. She looked stressed and rushed inside. "Miss Lily, I must speak with you." I quickly pulled her in. My mother froze when she saw her, her eyes welling up as if seeing a ghost from her past. Mrs. Gable sat down, taking a deep breath. "I witnessed Mr. Blackwood's death. You did what no one else could, but there is another truth you do not know." I tensed, my heart seizing. Another truth? Mrs. Gable looked at me, her expression grave. That cellar didn't just hold spirits. It held the secret of the entire Blackwood family. What you call a cycle actually stemmed from a much greater crime. My mother trembled, grabbing my hand. Don't say any more. But Mrs. Gable shook her head. No, she needs to know, because Miss Lily is the only one who can truly end it. I swallowed, my mind filled with dread. What crime? Mrs. Gable looked directly at me and spoke slowly. Years ago, when Mr. Blackwood's construction site collapsed, it wasn't just townspeople who died. There were young migrant workers who were buried alive. He knew they were there, but he remained silent to cover it up. He was afraid of the responsibility of losing his money, so he had the site quickly filled in and passed it off as an accident. The spirits of those workers are the true source of the haunting, and that is why the women brought into the house were nothing more than sacrifices, offerings made in place of the confession Mr. Blackwood never dared to make. My body shook uncontrollably, as if I had been plunged into ice. All this tragedy, all this pain, stemmed from one man's cowardice and greed. I gasped for air, my hands turning cold. So, it's not over. Mrs. Gable nodded, her eyes filled with sorrow. That's right, because no one has ever spoken this truth for all to hear. Those souls are still there, not yet truly free. I clutched my chest, feeling like I was suffocating. I thought I had overcome it, that I had broken the cycle. But there was another, deeper, more horrific truth yet to be unearthed. My mother burst into tears and hugged me. Lily, please, don't get involved anymore. Just let it be. Live a normal life. But I shook her head, tears streaming down my face. Mother, if I stop now, those souls will never find peace. Aunt Dahlia and all the others will never be at rest. I can't live a peaceful life knowing the truth is still buried. A flicker of hope appeared in Mrs. Gable's eyes. She nodded. If you are truly determined, I will help you. We must find the records of that construction collapse. There must be proof. My mind went blank. A new journey lay before me, fraught with danger, but it was the only way to close this chapter for good. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I remembered my aunt's eyes, the cries in the cellar, and Mr. Blackwood's final tear. It all urged me forward. Speak the truth. I knew the path ahead would not be easy, but I was no longer the weak, frightened girl I once was. I had walked through hell, and from that darkness, I had learned how to stand up. The next morning, I got ready. I hugged my mother, my voice firm. Mother, I am going to find the truth. I promise I won't abandon you again, but please trust me. My mother sobbed, nodding in despair. My child, may heaven protect you. I looked at Mrs. Gable, my eyes resolute. She nodded. Let's go. The journey is not over, and you must be the one to write the final chapter. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the house. The sky was bright, but my heart was still shadowed. I knew a new battle awaited me, not against ghosts in a cellar, but against the buried truth and the living men who had helped commit the crime. And this time, I swore I would not stop until everything was brought to light. That morning, as Mrs. Gable and I left the village, my heart pounded as if I were marching into battle. The enemy was no longer the ghosts of the cellar, but a dark truth buried for decades. We had to unearth it, knowing that the deeper we dug, the greater the danger. The construction collapse that year shook the entire region. Mrs. Gable said from the back of the hired carriage, her voice low. Over 30 workers went missing, many of them poor laborers from out of town. But the official records were falsified, listing only a few casualties. The rest were treated as if they never existed. Mr. Blackwood used his money to silence everyone. I clenched my fists, a wave of fury rising within me. The cycle wasn't some supernatural curse. It was the consequence of human crime. Those restless souls weren't demons. They were victims crying out for justice. Mrs. Gable, where do we start? I asked. She stared into the distance. We have to go to the old county archives where the construction permits were filed. So many years have passed, who knows what's left? But I believe there will be a trace. We arrived at a dusty old municipal building, now used as a records warehouse. The clerk was a frail old man with cloudy eyes. When I asked about the collapse, he paused, a flicker of worry in his eyes. That was a long time ago, child. The case was closed. Why stir up trouble? My voice was firm, my eyes burning with determination. I need the truth. The people who died unjustly that year deserve to have their names known. They deserve justice. The old man looked at me for a long time, then sighed and nodded. He rummaged through an old iron cabinet and handed me a yellowed folder. I took it with trembling hands and began to flip through the pages. The official record listed only 5 deaths, but tucked between the pages was a loose sheet with shaky handwriting. Actual number of victims, 34. Among them, 8 women and 3 children who had accompanied their parents to the site.
Buried under concrete. My heart seized, my hands shaking so violently I could barely hold the paper. I couldn't believe my eyes. Those people, including women and children, had been erased, left in a mass, unmarked grave. Mrs. Gable placed a hand on my shoulder. Her voice choked. That is the truth Mr. Blackwood hid his whole life, and that is why the spirits could not rest. I closed the folder, tears streaming down my face. I saw my Aunt Dahlia. I saw the faces from the photographs, all of them surrounding me. I will bring this to light, I whispered. But it wouldn't be that simple. As we stepped out of the archive, a figure blocked our path. It was a burly man with a menacing glare. He growled, "What do you two think you're doing with those papers?" I froze. Mrs. Gable whispered in my ear, "He's one of Mr. Blackwood's old henchmen. Many people still benefit from the crime of that year. They won't let this go." The man lunged forward to grab the file. I clutched it to my chest and screamed, "No, this is the truth. I won't let you bury it again." We struggled, and the papers scattered across the floor. Mrs. Gable grabbed a nearby wooden cane and swung it, hitting the man's arm and making him stagger back. I scrambled to collect the papers, holding them tight. The man's eyes bulged with rage. "You dare to defy the Blackwood family?" he roared. I looked him straight in the eye. I am not defying a family. I am defying a crime. The dead have waited too long for justice. My stare made him hesitate for a moment. Then he cursed, turned, and left, but not before throwing a threat over his shoulder. "You'll pay for this." We quickly left the archives, the file hidden securely in my bag. I knew that from now on I would be followed, but I couldn't turn back. On the way home, Mrs. Gable was pensive. "Now you must make the file public, but that's not enough. You need to find a witness, someone who saw what happened. Otherwise, they'll just say you fabricated it." I nodded. A name came to mind, Silas, an old mason. My mother had once mentioned him. He was one of the few survivors who had left the village and disappeared. If I could find him, everything might change. That night, I sat by the window, staring at the pale moon, clutching the old file. I saw a path of blood and tears stretching before me, but I also saw a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. My mother sat beside me, her eyes filled with worry. "Lily, are you sure you want to continue? You'll be up against powerful people, people who would kill to keep their secrets." I turned to her, my own eyes welling with tears. "Mother, I've come this far. I can't go back. I have to do this, not just for Aunt Dahlia and the other souls, but for myself. I want to live a life that is no longer haunted by darkness." My mother burst into tears and hugged me tightly. "My child, I believe in you." Her words were like a fire in my heart. I took a deep breath and looked up at the night sky. For the first time, I felt like I was walking my own path, no longer a pawn in someone else's game. But I knew that path would be filled with danger. The truth is never an easy thing to reveal. And then a thought struck me. If I were to fall, who would carry on? The answer was clear. No one but me. I clutched the file and whispered into the night. I promise, Aunt Dahlia, I promise all of you who were lost, I will see this through to the end. It took me days to track down Silas, the only Mason known to have survived the collapse. The elders in the village said that after cheating death, he left and wandered for years before disappearing completely. Some said he lived as a recluse in a shantytown by the river. Others claimed he was long dead. But my intuition told me he was still out there, a ghost himself, carrying a truth he never dared to speak. Mrs. Gable and I searched everywhere. We went to poor neighborhoods, asking anyone who would listen. Each shake of the head was a blow, but my determination never wavered. I knew that without a living witness, the file could be dismissed as a forgery, and I would never be able to clear the names of the dead. One afternoon, we arrived at an old ferry landing. The ferryman looked up at me and sighed. "You looking for the old man with the limp and the wild white beard who sits in that shack at the end of the row? People call him Silent Silas." My heart leaped. "Was he a Mason many years ago?" I asked urgently. The old man nodded, a sad look in his eyes. "Aye, he barely speaks a word, just stares at the river, his eyes always red. People say he lost his mind, but maybe he's the one you're looking for." My hands trembling, I followed Mrs. Gable to the dilapidated shack. The air was damp and smelled of dried fish and mud. In front of the shack sat a thin man with a limp and a tangled silver beard. He was as still as a statue, his hollow eyes fixed on the muddy river. I approached him, my heart pounding. "Sir, are you Silas, from the construction site all those years ago?" The man turned, his eyes glistening as if holding back a sea of blood and tears. He didn't speak, but he slowly nodded. I sat down in front of him, my own eyes filling with tears. "Sir, my name is Lily. I need your help. The people who died that year, their names were never cleared. I have the records, but no one will believe me without a witness. You are the only one left. Please tell me what happened so we can bring the truth to light." His chapped lips trembled, but no sound came out. Mrs. Gable whispered, "They call him Silent Silas, but he isn't mute. He chose silence. For years he has been trapped in his own trauma." Hearing this, I took his hand. "Sir, please, don't be silent anymore. If you don't speak, the dead will never be at peace. Their children, their families, they all died without anyone knowing. You are the only one who can free them." My tears fell onto his trembling hand. His eyes turned red, his face contorting in a struggle against a deep-seated pain. Then, suddenly, he broke down, a hoarse, choked sob tearing through the quiet air. They were never buried," he gasped, his voice broken like a child. "I saw it. Mr. Blackwood ordered them to fill it all in. He said it was an accident, that no one was to speak of it. I survived, but a part of me died that day." I covered my face and wept, his words a knife in my heart. Mrs. Gable was also crying, her hand resting on his shoulder. "Silas, now is the time to tell everyone. We can't let this crime remain buried any longer." Silas nodded, tears streaming down his aged face. But then a look of fear flashed in his eyes. "They won't let me," he whispered. "They threatened me. They said my family would die if I ever opened my mouth." "But Mr. Blackwood is dead now," I said, squeezing his hand.
That darkness is gone. We have to be brave for those we lost. You don't have to live in fear anymore. He looked at me, his eyes trembling. Then he seemed to gather all the courage he had left. He nodded slowly. "All right, I'll tell you, but you have to promise me, if something happens to me, you will finish this." "I promise," I said, nodding through my tears. We sat for a long time as Silas recounted every horrific detail. The screams and the collapsing structure, the small hands reaching out from the wet concrete, the cries of the women, and the cold, detached way Mr. Blackwood ordered it all to be covered up. Each word was a testament to the truth. Just as I finished writing down his testimony, darkness fell. The wind began to howl outside, and dogs started barking frantically. Mrs. Gable pulled me to my feet. "Someone followed us," she whispered. At that moment, the shack door burst open. Two strange men stormed in, their eyes filled with rage. One of them roared, "Who gave you permission to speak, old man?" Silas trembled, but I stood in front of him. "You won't touch him," I shouted. The man lunged at me, but Mrs. Gable was faster. She swung a wooden staff, hitting his arm hard. He cried out in pain and stumbled. I pulled Silas back as the other man advanced, his eyes bloodshot. "You little brat, you dare to stand against the Blackwood family's legacy?" I stared him down, my voice steady despite my shaking body. "I am standing against a crime, and I will not stop." My defiance seemed to make him pause. He cursed, grabbed his partner, and they fled into the night. They left behind a ransacked shack and the sound of our ragged breathing. I sank to the floor, clutching the file and Silas's testimony, tears streaming down my face. I knew this battle had now moved beyond the shadows of the cellar. I was now facing a network of criminals out in the open. Silas placed a trembling hand on my shoulder, his voice hoarse but clear. "Child, you are the last hope." I nodded, clutching the papers. A fire burned within me. I knew now there was no turning back. I returned to the village with Mrs. Gable and Silas, feeling both terrified and fiercely determined. I now held the official records and the living testimony of a witness, enough to change everything. But I knew that once the truth was out, those who had profited from the crime would not stay silent. The next morning, I decided to make my most important move. I would reveal everything to the entire village. I knew I needed the support of the community to face what was coming. If I kept this to myself, Silas, Mrs. Gable, my mother, and I would be picked off one by one. I went from house to house asking people to spread the word. "This afternoon at the village square," I told them, "I will tell the truth about the 34 people who died in the construction collapse." Some were shocked. Others told me I was being foolish. One person grabbed my hand and whispered, "Child, don't get involved with the Blackwood legacy. They are too powerful. No one can stand against them." I just smiled, my voice quiet but firm. If no one dares to, then our village will live in darkness forever. That afternoon, the sky was overcast, and a restless wind blew through the crowded village square. Faces in the crowd showed a mix of curiosity, doubt, and fear. My mother sat in a corner, trembling, her worried eyes never leaving me. Mrs. Gable stood behind me, and Silas sat to my left, his eyes red and raw. I stepped up onto the platform, clutching the file. My voice shook at first, but grew steadier. "My fellow villagers, today I am here to tell you a truth that has been hidden for over 30 years. The construction collapse was not an accident that killed 5 people. The real number is 34, and that included women and children." A murmur went through the crowd. I held up the old papers. "This is the original file, hidden in the county archives. And this," I said, turning to Silas, "is the only living witness who saw it with his own eyes." I helped Silas to the front. He trembled, his hands twisting the hem of his shirt, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and pain as he looked out at the crowd. Then he spoke, his voice hoarse and choked. I saw them. I heard their cries in the night. I heard the children weeping. I saw their small hands reaching out from the concrete. But Mr. Blackwood, he ordered it all filled in. He said anyone who disobeyed would die. I survived, but I have not truly lived a day since." The crowd fell silent. A few women covered their faces and began to sob. Men clenched their fists, their faces grim. Someone shouted, "My God, so we've been lied to all these years." The atmosphere was electric. I could see the rage in their eyes, a fire that had been suppressed for too long. But just then, an angry roar came from the back of the crowd. A group of burly men pushed their way forward. Leading there was the man who had attacked me at the archives. "She's lying. That old man is crazy. Are you trying to tarnish the Blackwood name?" The crowd hesitated, some stepping back in fear. I swallowed hard, but refused to show it. I took a step forward, holding up the file. "Here is the proof. Here is the witness. If you say I am lying, then explain why 34 people were buried without a single mention." The leader lunged forward to grab the file, but Mrs. Gable stepped in his way, her eyes like ice. "Are you going to try to silence us again? I have been silent my whole life, but today I will not let the truth be buried for one more second." Her defiant voice stirred the crowd. A few men stood up and shouted, "We need to get to the bottom of this. We can't let the souls of the dead suffer any longer." The square erupted into chaos. On one side were the enraged villagers, on the other the menacing henchmen. I clutched the file, my heart pounding. My mother rushed to my side. "Lily, be careful." But I stared directly at the henchman, my voice ringing out across the square. "The truth cannot be buried. The more you try to silence us, the more you prove that this crime is real." At that tense moment, a siren wailed. A police car pulled into the square. The villagers moved aside, and the henchmen's faces went pale. A middle-aged officer stepped out, his expression stern. "What is going on here?" I stepped forward, my hands shaking, and handed him the file. "Officer, this is the true record of the construction collapse. Over 34 people died, and it was covered up. This is a living witness. We would like to file a report." The officer took the file, his eyes widening as he read through the old pages. He looked up, his voice grim. "If what you say is true, this is a historic case. We will open an investigation immediately." The crowd erupted. Some people cried, others shouted with relief. The henchmen were taken into custody, their faces ashen. I stood there, tears streaming down my face. I could almost hear the whispers of my aunt, of all the lost souls. "Thank you."
Finally, someone dared to speak. As the sun set, the square slowly emptied. I sank onto the wooden steps, still trembling, but my heart felt light. My mother sat beside me and pulled me into a hug. "My child," she whispered, "you did what no one else dared to do." I looked up, my tears shimmering in the twilight. It wasn't just me. It was Aunt Dahlia, Silas, Mrs. Gable, and all those souls. We all spoke together. I knew the journey wasn't over. The police would investigate, and more terrible truths might be uncovered. But at least a light had been lit in the darkness, and I, once a helpless pawn, had become a beacon for justice. In the days that followed, our village awoke from a long nightmare. The police officially opened an investigation into the 30-year-old construction collapse. The old file and Silas's testimony became key pieces of evidence. The village buzzed with talk, but this time it wasn't vague rumor, it was cold, hard fact. Those who had once doubted or scorned me now looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and respect. Mr. Blackwood's henchmen were interrogated. Some claimed they were just following orders, but others confessed to their role in the cover-up, admitting they had traded their conscience for money. Hearing this, my heart ached. They had chosen wealth over humanity and lived their lives in fear as a result. Silas, the living witness, was no longer a silent recluse. Villagers came to apologize for leaving him to suffer alone for so long. He wept. For the first time in decades, his tears were not of guilt and trauma, but of release. "Thank you, Lily," he told me. "Without you, I would have died a coward. Now I can finally be at peace." His words made me cry. Deep down, I knew he was the one who had suffered the most, surviving only to carry the weight of a buried truth and the ghosts of so many others. As for my mother, at first, she was afraid to go outside, ashamed to face the community. But as people began to understand that she too was a victim, coerced into silence by Mr. Blackwood's threats, she slowly began to hold her head up again. One evening, she held my hand tightly and said, "Lily, I was wrong, weak and selfish. But because of you, because of your courage, I have been set free too. You are the one who ended it all." I hugged her, my heart filled with a mix of sorrow and love. Forgiveness is never easy, but holding on to hatred is not the answer. Deep down, I still needed my mother, and she needed me to start over. Mr. Blackwood's mansion was sealed off by the authorities. Investigators began excavating the site of the old collapse. When the first human bones were brought up from beneath the cold concrete, the entire village wept. It was a collective cry of grief, a cleansing rain that seemed to wash away the dark cloud that had hung over our community for decades. They erected a communal altar and lit incense for the 34 souls, calling out each name to restore the existence that had been stolen from them. I stood among them, tears streaming down my face. Through the thick smoke, I could almost see my Aunt Dahlia smiling, her expression softer than I had ever imagined. The whispers from the cellar seemed to echo one last time. "Thank you, child." Finally, someone spoke the truth. I knew she was free. Mrs. Gable, who had spent her life in service to the Blackwood family, finally breathed a sigh of relief. "I thought I would die in silence, carrying those horrific memories with me," she told me. "But you gave me the courage to speak. Now I can be at peace." I looked at her and saw that the heavy burden in her eyes was gone, replaced by a quiet light. In the end, the investigation concluded that Mr. Blackwood was primarily responsible for the deaths of 34 people. He was already gone, but his death served as the ultimate judgment for a life lived in guilt and fear. His accomplices would face justice. The villagers no longer had to whisper his name in fear. I returned to a normal life, but something inside me had changed. I was no longer the trembling girl forced into marriage and locked in a cold cellar. I had walked through hell, dared to face the truth, and emerged stronger. I promised myself I would live a life of purpose, for my Aunt Dahlia, for the 34 innocent souls, and for all the women like my mother who had been bound by fear. On my last night before leaving the village to start a new chapter, I stood before the communal altar and lit a stick of incense. The wind blew gently, carrying the smoke into the night sky. I whispered, "To all of you who were lost, rest in peace. I promise, from this day on, the truth will never be buried again. And I will live for the lives that were stolen." In that moment, I felt an incredible lightness in my soul. There were no more fears, no more ghosts, only peace. I smiled for the first time in many dark months. The story ends here, but for me and for everyone who witnessed it, it left a powerful lesson. The truth can be hidden and justice can be delayed, but eventually it will find its way to the light. And only when we dare to face our fears and speak out, and the darkness truly be dispelled. I knew my life would still have its challenges, but at least I had chosen my own path.
It was a path that began in darkness, led me through blood and tears, and finally brought me into the light. This brings our story to a close. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It was a journey filled with tears, darkness, and haunting memories. But in the end, the truth was revealed. The spirits were freed, and the living learned to confront their fears instead of running from them. Through this tale, we see that the more we hide and fear, the more the darkness consumes us. Only by daring to speak the truth can we find true peace for ourselves and our loved ones. Thank you so much for listening. That's the end of today's story. How did it make you feel? If you enjoyed it, please like this video. Leave a comment to share your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe to Bedtime Stories 247 so you won't miss our upcoming stories. Your interaction means the world to us and helps our channel grow. Thanks again, and see you next time. Moon Night.